My name is Evelyn Reed, and I'm a neurosurgeon in Boston. 15 years ago, my family didn't just bury my sister, Claire. They buried the truth about her death right along with her. They told me it was an accident, but that lie fell apart the moment I saw the old scar on the neck of a patient, a scar identical to the one that killed Claire. He shakily recounted a buried memory, the man with a police badge who murdered my sister and then carved that same scar into his own neck as a silent warning. But when I took this horrifying truth home, my own father roared, "You'll destroy this family." At that moment, I realized they weren't afraid of the killer. They were afraid of the truth. They chose silence to survive in the hell of lies they had built. Fine. Then I'll be the fire that burns it all to the ground. I live in Boston, Massachusetts, and I work as a neurosurgeon at St. Mary's Medical Center. People who meet me for the first time usually see a woman who is composed, precise, and dedicated to her career. They see the steady hands that can navigate the intricate structures of the human brain and the sharp eyes that never miss a detail in the operating room. What they do not see is the weight that I carry inside me every single day. What they cannot see is the scar I keep hidden in my own memory, a scar left behind by the death of my younger sister 15 years ago. Whenever I put on my surgical cap and gloves, I feel the same rush of responsibility. I remind myself that life and death can depend on every movement of my hands. Yet beneath that professional armor, I hear echoes from the past. I heard the last phone call I ever had with my sister Claire. I see the headlines from the newspapers that said her death was an accident, and I remember standing by her coffin, promising myself that one day I would find the truth, even if everyone else told me to let it go. I grew up in a modest home outside of Chicago. My father worked long hours as a construction manager, and my mother stayed at home to take care of me and Claire. Claire was 4 years younger than me. She had this laugh that could light up a room, high-pitched and unstoppable once it started. She was always the one pushing me to stop being so serious. When I was studying late at night during high school, she would sneak into my room with a bowl of popcorn and ask me to take a break. She wanted to be a photographer. She carried her camera everywhere, capturing small details that most people overlooked. The day she died, everything in my life changed. She was only 16. The police told us it was an accident, that she fell and hit her head while walking home late at night. But even as a teenager, I knew something was wrong with that explanation. The bruises on her body, the strange scar near the base of her skull, and the fear I remembered in her voice when she had called me earlier that evening. She had whispered that she had seen something she should not have. Then the call dropped. The next day, they found her body. I tried to ask questions back then. I went to the detective in charge, a man named Richard Hayes. He listened with a stiff face and wrote things down in his notebook, but I could tell he did not believe me. He told me accidents happen, that grief makes us search for patterns where none exist. My parents wanted me to stop asking questions. My mother begged me not to stir things up. My father said nothing, just stared at the wall whenever Claire's name was mentioned. Eventually, the case was closed, and I was left with nothing but silence and suspicion. That silence followed me through college and medical school. I threw myself into my studies, working harder than anyone else. I told myself that if I could not save Claire, then I would save other people. That was how I survived the grief. But the truth is, no matter how many surgeries I perform, no matter how many patients walk out of the hospital alive because of me, I cannot silence the memory of my sister lying in that coffin. I still dream about her sometimes. In those dreams, she is reaching for me, asking me to help her. And I always wake up with my heart pounding, drenched in sweat, feeling like I failed her all over again. When I talk to colleagues, I keep things light. They know me as professional and driven. I do not tell them about the nights I sit alone in my apartment, drinking tea that has gone cold, staring at the same photograph of Claire holding her camera by the lake. In that picture, the wind is blowing her hair across her face, but she is smiling at me, the person behind the lens. That smile is frozen in time, unbothered by the darkness that came later. Some nights, I hear her voice so clearly that I answer aloud. I say things like, "I am still here, Claire," or "I am not giving up." If anyone ever overheard me, they would think I had lost my mind. But maybe losing my mind a little is what keeps me sane. The hospital is my battlefield and my refuge. When I walk through the bright hallways, wearing my badge and white coat, I feel both protected and exposed. Nurses nod as I pass, residents follow me with notebooks ready. They see authority in me, but inside, I am still that older sister who could not protect her sibling. I have friends, of course, but most of them are other doctors. We rarely talk about anything outside of work. Relationships have come and gone. I once was engaged years ago, but it fell apart because I could never fully let anyone in. My fiancé at the time said I carried too many ghosts. He was right. I carry Claire with me every day. I do not know how not to. There is one person who knows pieces of my truth. Her name is Natalie. She is a pediatric surgeon and my closest friend at the hospital. One night after a long shift, we sat on the rooftop terrace outside the staff lounge. The city lights glowed around us. Natalie handed me a cup of coffee and said, "You never stop, Evelyn. You push harder than anyone I know. What are you running from?" I wanted to lie. I wanted to say I was just ambitious. But instead, I told her about Claire. I told her about the phone call, the scar, and the way the police dismissed everything. Natalie listened without interrupting. When I finished, she put her hand over mine and said, "Maybe you are not running, maybe you are searching." That was the first time I felt understood in years. Every morning before I scrub in, I whisper a small prayer. I am not a religious woman, not really, but I pray to Claire. I say, "Watch me, little sister. Help me keep them alive." It is my ritual, the one thing that steadies me. The truth is, I live in two worlds. One is the sterile, bright, and organized world of medicine, full of charts and scalpels and statistics. The other is the shadowed world of memory, haunted by unanswered questions and the sound of my sister's laughter fading into silence. Some days I think I have learned to balance both worlds. Other days, the shadow overwhelms me. I cannot watch news about young girls going missing without feeling my stomach clench. I cannot pass by an alley at night without imagining Claire stumbling there, terrified, alone. 15 years, it should be enough time for wounds to heal, but scars do not disappear. They just hide under the skin, waiting for the right moment to burn again. And that moment was coming, though I did not know it yet. It was waiting for me in the form of a patient whose life would soon lie in my hands. A young man with a mysterious scar that mirrored my sister. A young man who would bring back everything I had tried to bury. For now, though, I was still living my routine. I woke at 5:30, ran 3 miles through the quiet streets of Boston, showered, and drove to the hospital before the sun rose. I walked past the nurses at the front desk, smiling just enough to hide my exhaustion. I reviewed charts, studied scans, and prepared my team. From the outside, I looked like any other successful surgeon. From the inside, I was a storm barely contained. Sometimes when I wash my hands before a surgery, I stare at the water running over my fingers and imagine it turning red. I shake the image away, but it always returns. That is what grief does. It does not end. It transforms into different shapes, invading even the most ordinary moments. One afternoon, after finishing a long operation, I went to the hospital cafeteria. I sat alone at a corner table, pushing food around my plate. Natalie found me there. She sat down across from me, setting her tray on the table with a loud thud. "You look like death," she said, half joking. I smiled weakly. "Thanks for the compliment. I am serious. You need to take a break." "When is the last time you had a vacation?" "I do not remember," I admitted. "That is not healthy." "Neither is brain surgery," I said, and she rolled her eyes. We ate in silence for a while. Then she asked, "Do you still dream about her?" I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. "Yes, almost every night." Natalie reached across the table again. "Maybe the dreams are not just memories. Maybe they are telling you something." I wanted to dismiss her words, but deep down, I knew she was right. Something inside me had never stopped pulling at the threads of the past. Something inside me still believed there was more to Claire's death than anyone admitted. I left the cafeteria that day with a strange restlessness in my chest. I told myself to focus on my patients, to bury my feelings in work. But part of me felt like the past was about to collide with the present in a way I could not escape. And I was right. The first time I saw Michael's scans, I felt a sharp tightening in my chest. His case had come through the ER just before dawn, a car accident involving a young man in his early 20s. The CT showed bleeding near the temporal lobe and pressure building dangerously fast. By the time I reviewed the images, the ER team had stabilized him just enough to buy us a few hours, but surgery was inevitable. Without it, he would lose both function and his life. I sat in the dark reading room, my eyes fixed on the glowing screens. I traced the outlines of the hematoma and the fractures. It was the kind of case that demanded precision and speed. This was the work that defined me, the work that gave me purpose. Yet something about his file made me pause longer than usual. His name was Michael Carter, 22 years old, college student, no significant medical history, just a young life shattered in a second on the highway. When I walked into his room for the first time, he was lying unconscious, intubated with monitors beeping steadily at his side. His skin was pale, his dark hair matted with blood near the temple where the impact had struck. Nurses moved around him, checking IVs and adjusting equipment. I approached slowly, my eyes drawn to his face. There was something oddly familiar about him, though I could not place it at first. Then my gaze shifted lower to the base of his skull where the nurses had shaved the hair for a better view, and that was when I saw it. A faint but unmistakable scar, a thin, curved line etched into the skin just above the nape of his neck. I felt my breath catch in my throat. My hands went cold. I knew that scar. I had seen it before, on Claire's body the night they let me identify her. It was not identical, but it was too similar to dismiss. The same placement, the same crescent shape. For a moment the room spun around me and I had to steady myself on the edge of his bed. A nurse named Rachel noticed. She glanced at me, concerned. "Are you all right, Dr. Reed?" I forced a smile, though my heart was pounding. "I am fine, just a long night." But I was not fine. That scar had opened a door I thought I had sealed years ago. I spent the next hours preparing. I ordered additional scans, reviewed every angle, and assembled the surgical team. I briefed the residents, my voice steady though inside I was unraveling. The case was dangerous but doable. What unsettled me was not the complexity of the surgery, but the collision of past and present embodied in this unconscious young man. Later, as I sat in the staff lounge sipping coffee that tasted like burnt metal, Natalie walked in. She saw the tension in my shoulders immediately. "Rough case?" she asked, dropping into the chair beside me. "Yes," I said simply. She waited, knowing I would eventually say more. Finally, I added, "The patient has a scar. It looks exactly like Claire." Natalie's eyes widened. "Evelyn, are you sure?" I nodded slowly. "I cannot stop thinking about it." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Do you think it means something?" I looked at her, my mind torn between logic and memory. "I do not know. Maybe it is coincidence." But I have never believed in coincidence when it comes to her. Natalie touched my hand briefly. "Focus on the surgery first. Save his life. Then you can figure out the rest." Her words steadied me. She was right. Michael's life was in my hands and I could not let ghosts distract me. As the morning stretched on, I reviewed every instrument, every step, making sure the OR was prepared. My resident, a young woman named Julia, followed me with a clipboard. She asked questions rapidly, eager to learn. "What is our main concern with this case, Dr. Reed?" "The hematoma," I replied. "It is pressing against the temporal lobe. If we do not relieve the pressure, he could lose speech and memory permanently, assuming he survives at all." Julia scribbled notes, nodding seriously. I added, "We also need to be careful of vascular structures nearby. One wrong move and he could bleed out on the table." Julia swallowed hard. I could see the weight of it settling on her. I remembered being in her place once, watching my attending outline risks that seemed insurmountable. Now I was the one carrying the burden. When the time came, we wheeled Michael into the operating room. The lights were bright, almost blinding. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled the air. I scrubbed in, washing my hands slowly, deliberately, as if I could wash away the unease lodged in my chest. Inside the OR, the anesthesiologist checked vitals. The scrub nurse laid out instruments in perfect rows. Julia stood on my right, ready but nervous. I looked down at Michael one last time before the incision. His face was peaceful in unconsciousness, unaware of the storm swirling around him. "Scalpel," I said, my voice steady. The surgery began. Hours passed in a blur of concentration. My mind narrowed to the field under the microscope, every vessel and nerve magnified. I worked carefully, suctioning blood, clipping vessels, and removing bone fragments. The room was silent except for the hum of machines and the occasional command I gave. At one point, Julia whispered, "Blood pressure is dropping." I felt a flash of panic but forced myself to breathe. "Clamp here," I instructed, pointing, "more suction. Stay with me, Michael." Gradually, we stabilized him. The bleeding slowed, the pressure eased. I repaired what I could and closed the incision carefully. When it was over, I stepped back, sweat dripping beneath my mask. I felt both relief and exhaustion. Michael's vitals were stable. The surgery was successful. But as I removed my gloves and looked at him lying there, I could not shake the thought of that scar. Later, when I was finally alone in the surgeon's lounge, I sank into a chair and buried my face in my hands. I whispered to myself, "What is happening, Claire? Why him? Why now?" The questions had no answers yet, but I knew this was only the beginning. When Michael came out of anesthesia, it was late evening. The recovery room was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitors and the occasional shuffle of nurses moving between beds. I had been there for hours, watching, waiting. It was not unusual for me to sit by a patient after such a high-risk surgery, but this time was different. This time, I needed to see his eyes open. I needed to hear his voice. His eyelids fluttered, and a nurse leaned over, checking vitals. He groaned softly, trying to move, then winced at the pain. I stepped closer. "Michael, can you hear me?" My voice was calm but insistent. His eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then sharpening on me. His lips parted. "You doctor?" "Yes," I said, leaning closer. "I am Dr. Reed. You are safe." The surgery went well. He blinked, processing. His throat was dry, his words raspy. "Am I alive?" "You are," I said gently. "You are alive because you fought hard and we took care of you." He nodded slightly, then let out a shaky breath. His gaze shifted, restless as though searching for something. His hand twitched, reaching toward the base of his skull where the bandages covered the surgical site. His fingers brushed the dressing, and I noticed the movement stop suddenly when he felt the scar beneath it. His breathing quickened. "It is all right," I reassured him. "That is from before, not from me." His eyes snapped back to mine, filled with something between confusion and fear. "Before?" I hesitated. "Yes, it looks like an old scar." "Do you remember how you got it?" He closed his eyes, his brow furrowing. For a moment I thought he had drifted off again. Then he whispered, "A man? What man, Michael?" I leaned closer, my heart pounding. "A man, bad man. I was little." He trailed off, his voice breaking, his breath hitching as if something inside him had locked shut. The nurse glanced at me uncertain. "Should I sedate him?" "No," I said quickly, then softer, "no. Let him rest." Michael's eyes rolled back, and he slipped into a light sleep. His words echoed in my mind. A bad man. That night I barely slept. I kept replaying the conversation in my head. The scar, the bad man, the fragments that made no sense yet fit too perfectly into my memories of Claire. The next morning I returned to his room early. He was awake, sipping water with the nurse's help. His eyes tracked me as I entered. "Morning," I said gently. "How are you feeling?" "Sore," he whispered, "but better. That is normal after brain surgery. The pain will ease with time." He nodded, then stared at me as though trying to place me. "You stayed?" "Yes, I stayed." "Why?" "Because I wanted to make sure you were all right." He studied me for a long moment. "You remind me of someone." My throat tightened. "Who?" He shook his head, wincing from the motion. "I do not know, just someone." I pulled up a chair and sat beside his bed. "Michael, yesterday you said something. Do you remember? You mentioned a man." His expression changed instantly. His eyes darted toward the door, his voice dropped. "I should not say." "Why not?" "Because he will know." I leaned forward, lowering my voice too. "Who will know?" "The bad man." My chest felt heavy. "Michael, you are safe here. No one can hurt you in this hospital." His eyes filled with tears. "You do not understand. He finds people. He always finds people." I wanted to press further, but the fear on his face stopped me. I changed my tone, softer, reassuring. "It is okay. We do not have to talk about it right now. Just rest." Still, even in silence, he kept touching the scar at the base of his skull, as if it carried the weight of everything he was afraid to say. Later that afternoon, Natalie found me in the corridor. She could see the exhaustion on my face. "How is he doing?" she asked. "Physically stable," I said, "but he remembers things." He said something about a bad man. Natalie frowned. "And you are thinking about Claire." I looked at her sharply. "How could I not?" "The scar is almost identical." "He talks about being little, about someone hurting him. What if it is connected?" She sighed, rubbing her forehead. "Evelyn, I know how much you want answers, but be careful. You are his surgeon, not his detective." I clenched my jaw. Maybe I have to be both. That evening, when I checked on Michael again, he looked more alert. He gestured weakly toward the chair. "Sit." I sat. He studied me for a long time before speaking. "When I was a kid, I saw something bad. My heart raced." "What did you see?" His hands trembled. "A man hurt someone. A girl." I tried to tell, but no one listened. They said I was confused. A chill ran through me. "A girl? Yes, she had a camera, she was crying." Then nothing. His voice cracked. "I do not remember everything, just pieces, but I remember her face." I froze, my breath caught. "A camera." Claire always carried her camera. I tried to steady my voice. "Michael, what happened to her?" He shook his head violently, panic rising. "I cannot. If I talk, he will come for me." Who is he?" Michael's eyes filled with terror. "The bad man." He turned away, trembling. I knew I could not push him further. But his words had carved into me like a scalpel. A girl with a camera, a man hurting her. The scar. For 15 years, I had carried suspicion without proof. And now, in the words of this fragile young man, the past had come alive again. I walked out of his room, my legs unsteady. For the first time in years, I felt the possibility that Claire's death had not been an accident. I felt the truth pressing against the surface, threatening to break through. And I knew I could not look away. I returned to the hospital the next morning earlier than I normally would have. The city streets were still quiet, dew glistening on the cars parked along the side roads, the air cool with that heavy Boston mist that makes everything smell faintly of salt and stone. I had barely slept. I tossed and turned all night, thinking about Michael's words, about the scar, about Claire. I had stared so long at her photograph that I began to imagine she was looking back at me, waiting for me to finally act. By the time I reached Michael's floor, the nurses were doing their morning rounds. I greeted them quickly, nodding, before walking straight into his room. I told myself I was just checking on his neurological recovery. That was the excuse I would give if anyone asked why I was spending so much time with one patient. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was looking for answers. Michael was awake, propped up against his pillows, an IV still feeding fluids into his arm. The sunlight from the narrow window caught on his pale face, and for a fleeting moment I saw the boy he must have been years ago, vulnerable, lost, searching for safety. His eyes met mine the second I walked in. "You came back," he whispered, his voice still rough. "Of course I came back. How are you feeling today?" "Sore," he admitted, shifting slightly. "And confused. That is normal after brain surgery. Your body has been through a trauma. Confusion, strange dreams, even flashes of memory can happen." He stared at me for a long time as though weighing whether to believe me. Then, almost reluctantly, he asked, "Did I say anything yesterday?" "Yes. You mentioned a man. You said he was bad." His eyes flickered toward the door, then back to me. "Did I say anything else? You mentioned a girl. You said she had a camera." Michael's expression changed, his lips pressed together, his jaw tightening. He closed his eyes for several seconds as if gathering the courage to let something buried rise to the surface. Finally, he whispered, "I was little. Maybe 7, maybe 8. I was hiding. I saw them." My pulse quickened. "Who did you see, Michael?" His hands gripped the blanket tightly. "A man and a girl." He was angry. He grabbed her. She dropped her camera. She screamed, and then his voice trailed off. "And then what?" Michael trembled, tears forming in the corners of his eyes. Then silence, a terrible silence. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "What happened to the girl?" He shook his head violently, panic rising in him. "I do not know. I only remember the sound. A thud. And then she was gone." My throat felt tight, like I was swallowing glass. I forced myself to keep my voice steady. "Do you remember what the man looked like?" Michael's lips trembled. He was tall, strong. He had a badge. I froze. A badge. My mind immediately pulled up the image of Detective Richard Hayes, the man who had handled Claire's case 15 years ago. His square jaw, his piercing eyes, the way he told me to stop looking for patterns in grief. Could it really have been him? Michael's voice broke the spiral of my thoughts. "I should not say more. If I do, he will come for me." "You are safe here," I told him firmly, though even as I said it, a chill traveled down my spine. Michael shook his head. "No one is safe, not if he knows." The nurse walked in then, checking his vitals. Michael fell silent instantly, turning his face toward the wall. I stepped out of the room, my heart hammering. The hallway smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee, a smell I normally found grounding. Not today. Today it only made the walls feel closer, the fluorescent lights harsher. Natalie found me pacing near the nurse's station. She looked at me with concern. "Evelyn, you are pale. What happened?" I hesitated, then lowered my voice. "He remembers things. He said there was a girl with a camera. He said there was a man with a badge." Her eyes widened. "Evelyn, are you saying what I think you are saying?" I nodded slowly, the weight of it pressing down on me. What if it was Hayes? What if the detective himself was involved? Natalie touched my arm, her voice urgent. "Be careful. You are his surgeon. You cannot let this consume you." I clenched my jaw. Maybe I cannot let it go either. Maybe I never could. That night I sat in my apartment with the lights off. The city outside hummed with life, but inside it was silent. I stared at the old photo of Claire again. She was laughing, holding her camera, hair blowing across her face. My fingers traced the glass of the frame. "Tell me what to do," I whispered. "Tell me how to bring this to light." The next day, I went back to Michael's room. I pulled a chair close to his bed and sat down. My voice was soft, steady. "Michael, I believe you. Whatever you saw matters." He turned his eyes to me, wide and uncertain. "No one ever believed me before. I believe you." "Why?" he asked quietly, suspicion and hope mixing in his tone. "Because I lost someone too, someone who should not have died. She carried a camera everywhere she went. Her name was Claire. She was my sister." Michael's breath caught. His lips parted. "Claire." He said the name slowly, as if pulling it from somewhere deep in his memory. "Yes, I remember that name." My chest tightened. "Are you sure?" He nodded faintly. "Yes, she was crying. She was scared." Tears stung my eyes, but I held them back. "Michael, you have to tell me everything. Even the smallest detail could matter." He pressed his hand to his forehead, wincing as though the memories themselves caused him pain. I remember a car, dark, headlights. I remember the man yelling. He said something about not having a choice. Do you remember his face? Michael trembled, his voice breaking. His face, I saw him again later. In a uniform, a police uniform. Michael nodded, his voice almost a whisper. Yes, he told me to forget. He said if I remembered, he would make me disappear like her. I froze. My stomach dropped as though the floor beneath me had given way. For 15 years, I had lived with doubt and silence. Now, in this hospital room, Michael's trembling words had cracked the silence wide open. I wanted to ask more, but the monitor beside him beeped rapidly, his heart rate spiking with his panic. The nurse hurried in, adjusting his IV, shooting me a look that said enough for now. I stood slowly, forcing calm into my voice. Rest now, Michael, you are safe. But his eyes told me he did not believe it. And truthfully, neither did I. I drove out of the city on a gray Sunday afternoon, the kind of day when the clouds hang so low they feel like they are pressing on your chest. My apartment walls had been closing in on me, and I could not keep pacing in circles anymore. I needed to talk to my parents. I had avoided this for years, burying my questions under work and distance, but after what Michael had told me, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. If I stayed silent now, I would fall into the same darkness that had swallowed Claire's truth. The highway stretched long and empty, trees lining both sides, their leaves beginning to turn with the early signs of fall. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. My parents still lived in the same house just outside of Chicago where we grew up. I had not been there in months. Phone calls were easier, short updates, safe topics. Work, weather, birthdays, never Claire. We never said her name. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat in the car for a long moment, staring at the familiar windows, the porch light that my mother always left on, even during the day. It was habit or maybe superstition. My father's truck was parked out front. My heart raced. I felt like a teenager again, about to confess something I was not supposed to say. Inside, the house smelled the same as it always did, a mix of coffee, laundry detergent, and faint traces of my mother's perfume. She came out of the kitchen, surprised to see me. Evelyn, honey, you did not say you were coming. I hugged her, breathing in the comfort of her familiar scent, though my chest was tight. I know, I needed to see you. My father appeared from the living room, remote in his hand. His hair was grayer now, his shoulders more stooped, but his eyes were the same. Quiet. Guarded. Evelyn, he said with a nod. Dad, we sat in the living room, the television muted. The air between us felt heavy. My mother fussed, offering me coffee, cookies, anything to fill the silence. Finally, I cleared my throat. I need to talk about Claire. Her name dropped into the room like a stone into still water. My mother froze, the tray of cookies trembling in her hands. My father's jaw tightened. Evelyn, my mother said softly, it has been 15 years, I know, but I cannot stop thinking about her. My father spoke, his voice low. We have been over this. It was an accident. It was not, I said firmly. My voice surprised even me with its sharpness. It was never just an accident. My mother sat down slowly, clutching her hands together. Why now, Evelyn? Why are you bringing this up again? Because I have a patient, I said. His name is Michael. He is young. He has a scar almost identical to the one Claire had. And he remembers things. My father's eyes snapped to mine. What things? He remembers a man. He remembers a girl with a camera. He remembers violence. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Evelyn, please, stop. I leaned forward, desperate. Mom, Dad, listen to me. He said the man had a badge. My father stood abruptly, pacing across the room. His face was red, his hands clenched. This is enough, Evelyn. You are letting your grief eat you alive. I rose to my feet too. No, you never wanted to see the truth. You shut me down then and you are shutting me down now, but I will not stay quiet anymore. My mother sobbed softly. Evelyn, we lost her. We cannot lose you too. You are not losing me, I said. I am trying to find her. My father turned on me, his eyes blazing with something between anger and fear. Do you know what it will do to us if you drag this up again? Do you know what it will do to your mother? To our family? What about what it did to Claire? I shouted. What about what it did to her? The room went silent. My father's chest rose and fell heavily. My mother wiped her eyes, whispering, She is gone, Evelyn. She is gone. But she should not be, I said, my voice breaking. She should have had a life. She should have been here, and I need to know why she is not. My father sank into his chair, covering his face with his hands. His voice was muffled but heavy. I told you then, and I will tell you now. Some things are better left alone. I stared at him, my whole body shaking. How can you say that? She was your daughter. He lifted his head, his eyes wet though he would never admit to tears. I loved her, and I love you. That is why I am telling you to let it go. I could not speak for a moment, stunned by the finality in his tone. My mother reached for my hand, her fingers trembling. Please, Evelyn, do not reopen this wound. We barely survived it the first time. I pulled my hand away gently. I cannot do that. Not anymore. I left not long after, the silence in the car heavier than before. My parents had chosen their survival over the truth. I could not blame them entirely. Grief had broken us all in different ways, but I could not follow their path. I could not live in silence. On the drive back, I replayed my father's words. Some things are better left alone. He had said it then, and he had said it now. But the more I thought about it, the more it sounded less like protection and more like fear. Fear of what might come out if the truth was dragged into the light. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. If they would not stand with me, then I would stand alone. For Claire. For Michael. For every night I had woken to the sound of her voice in my dreams. When I finally reached my apartment, I sat in the dark, staring out at the city lights. I felt both lonelier and more determined than ever. My parents could close their eyes. The police could bury their files, but I would not. Some things should not be left alone. Some things demand to be unearthed, and I was ready to dig until my hands bled. The morning after my fight with my parents, I woke up with a pounding headache and the taste of stale coffee still on my tongue. I had barely slept, but lying in bed only made my mind spiral more. I kept hearing my father's words repeating over and over. Some things are better left alone. And the more I thought about it, the more it felt like a warning instead of advice. By 7:30, I was showered, dressed, and on my way to the precinct. I told myself this was just a rational step, that if Michael's memories connected to anything real, there had to be some record, some file, some evidence that was missed or buried. My pulse raced as I parked in front of the same old brick building I remembered from 15 years ago. Walking toward the front doors, I felt like I was stepping back into a nightmare I had never truly left. The reception area smelled like floor polish and burnt coffee, the same as it had when I was a teenager begging someone to listen to me about my sister. Behind the desk sat a young officer who could not have been more than 25. His uniform was crisp, his eyes polite but detached. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "Yes. My name is Dr. Evelyn Reed. I need to speak with someone about a case from 15 years ago." He frowned. "Do you have a case number?" "No. It was my sister's death. Claire Reed." She was 16, the officer typed quickly on his computer, scanning. After a moment, he shook his head. "That case was closed." "I know," I said sharply. "That is why I am here." He hesitated, then picked up the phone and murmured something into it. After a few minutes, a heavy-set man in plain clothes came out from a hallway. He had thinning hair and a weary expression. "Dr. Reed, I am Sergeant Walker. Let us talk in my office." I followed him down the corridor, my stomach knotted. His office was small, stacked with files, the blinds half closed. He gestured for me to sit. "So you want to talk about your sister?" "Yes, Claire Reed. Her death was ruled an accident, but there were details that never made sense." Walker leaned back, folding his hands over his stomach. Accidents often leave families with questions. This was not an accident. She had a wound on the base of her skull, a scar that made no sense. And now I have a patient with the exact same scar. He remembers a man. He remembers a girl with a camera. Walker's eyes sharpened slightly. "A patient? I am a neurosurgeon. His name is Michael Carter. He came in after a car accident. While recovering, he started talking about what he saw as a child. He described a girl with a camera. He remembered a man with a badge." Walker sighed heavily. "Dr. Reed, memories from childhood can be unreliable, especially under trauma or medication." I leaned forward, my voice trembling with anger. "Do not dismiss this." "I was dismissed 15 years ago. My sister deserved better than that." Walker studied me for a long moment. Then he said, "Off the record, there were whispers back then. Some officers thought the scene was strange. But Detective Hayes closed the case." Hayes, the name hit me like a punch to the chest. Richard Hayes. The same man I remembered from those days, standing in our living room telling me grief makes us see patterns that are not there. "Where is Hayes now?" I asked. "Retired. Lives out by the lake." I gripped the arms of my chair to keep my hands from shaking. "Sergeant, I need access to Claire's file." He shook his head firmly. "I cannot do that. The case is closed. You do not understand. This is not just about the past. If Michael is right, there is still someone out there who hurt her, someone with a badge." Walker leaned forward now, his voice low. "Be careful, Dr. Reed. Digging into old cases can stir up things you may not want to find." I met his gaze steadily. "The only thing I do not want is another night lying awake hearing my sister cry for help in my dreams." We stared at each other for a long time. Finally, he exhaled sharply, pulling open a drawer. He slid a thin folder across the desk. "This is a copy of what is left. Do not tell anyone where you got it." I opened it with trembling hands. Inside were a few photographs, the coroner's report, and Hayes' notes. My eyes caught on the autopsy sketch. The wound at the base of the skull was circled faintly in pencil, then scribbled over with the word accident. My stomach churned. Why was this never investigated further? I demanded. Walker shook his head. You would have to ask Hayes. I closed the folder, clutching it to my chest. Then I will. As I walked out of the station, the autumn wind hit my face hard, but it barely registered. My heart was pounding with fear and determination. If Hayes was the man Michael remembered, if Hayes had been there that night, then the story I had been told my entire life was a lie, and I was ready to face him. I waited until my shift ended before driving out to find him. The hospital lights faded behind me, replaced by the darker stretches of Boston's outskirts. I had Hayes' address now, scribbled from a contact I had dug out of a database that Walker's folder had pointed me toward. Retired Detective Richard Hayes. The man who once stood in my living room after my sister's death, speaking in clipped tones about accidents and grief. The man who had looked me in the eye as a teenager and told me to let it go. The closer I got to his neighborhood, the more my stomach knotted. It was a quiet area near the lake, the kind of place people went when they wanted to disappear from the noise of the city. Narrow streets lined with trees, houses set far apart with wide lawns. I parked at the curb across from his home and sat there for a long time, staring. The house was a 2-story colonial, paint peeling from the shutters, the porch sagging slightly. A place that looked both lived in and abandoned, a contradiction much like the man himself. The porch light was on even though it was only late afternoon. A sign of habit, maybe, or maybe of someone who feared the dark. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I kept asking myself what I was doing. He was a retired detective. He had power once, and men like him did not lose their networks overnight. If he was guilty of something, confronting him might put me in danger. But the alternative, walking away, was worse. I had lived 15 years with silence, and I was done with it. Finally, I got out of the car and walked across the street. My legs felt heavy, like I was moving through water. When I reached the porch, I could hear the faint creak of the boards beneath my shoes. I raised my hand and knocked. There was no answer at first, then I heard movement inside. The door opened slowly, revealing a man older than I remembered but unmistakable. Richard Hayes. His hair was thinner, his shoulders hunched, but his eyes were still sharp, assessing. "Dr. Reed," he said, his voice gravelly. "I heard about you." The surgeon. I swallowed hard. "You remember me, of course. I never forget a case. Especially one that never seemed to go away. May I come in?" He studied me for a long moment, then stepped aside. The interior smelled faintly of old books and whiskey. The living room was cluttered, photographs stacked on tables, papers in uneven piles. He gestured to a chair. "Sit." I sat, my hands clenched in my lap. He poured himself a drink, amber liquid sloshing into a glass. He didn't offer me one. He sank into his chair opposite me, staring. "So what brings you here after all these years?" I took a deep breath. "My sister, Claire." His expression barely changed. "What about her?" I leaned forward, my voice steady but sharp. "She did not die in an accident, and you knew it." He took a slow sip from his glass, his eyes never leaving mine. "That is a heavy accusation." "I have a patient," I said. "A young man. He has a scar just like hers. He remembers things. He remembers a girl with a camera. He remembers a man with a badge." Hayes' hand froze on his glass just for a fraction of a second. Then he set it down carefully. "People remember strange things under trauma. Memories are unreliable. Do not do that," I snapped. "Do not dismiss me like you did 15 years ago. He remembers her. He remembers you." His jaw tightened. "Did he say my name?" "Not yet, but he will." For the first time, Hayes looked away, staring at the window where the lake shimmered faintly in the distance. His shoulders sagged. I whispered, "You were there, were you not?" He rubbed his face with one hand, sighing heavily. "You do not know what you are asking." I slammed my hand on the arm of the chair. "I am asking for the truth. For 15 years I have lived with questions while you drank yourself into retirement. Tell me what happened to her." His voice was low, almost broken. "She saw something she should not have." I felt my breath catch. "What? A deal? A meeting? Men you do not cross. She was just in the wrong place." My chest tightened. "So they killed her." He closed his eyes. "They told me to close the case, to write it up as an accident. If I didn't," he stopped. "If you didn't what?" He looked at me finally, his eyes red. "They threatened my family, my wife, my kids. They said if I did not bury it, I would bury them." I stared at him, fury and grief battling inside me. "So you chose them over her." His voice broke. "I had no choice." "There's always a choice," I hissed. "You let her die twice. Once when they killed her, and again when you covered it up." He slammed his fist on the table, his own anger flaring. You think I have not lived with that every single day? You think I sleep at night? I see her face. I see your face standing there in that living room begging me. I see it every damn day. We sat in silence, both of us breathing heavily, the air thick with everything unspoken. Finally, he whispered, I tried to protect you. Protect me? By silencing me? By keeping you alive. The words hit me like ice. Hayes leaned back, his face drawn. Those men, they are not gone, the ones behind it, they still have reach. If your patient remembers too much, if you keep digging, they will come for you. Let them, I said, my voice steady. I am not afraid anymore. You should be, he muttered. I stood, my legs shaking. I came here for answers, and now I have them. Claire was killed because she saw too much. You buried it to save yourself, but I will not bury it again. Hayes looked up at me, something like resignation in his eyes. Then you are going to need help. I paused at the doorway. From you? He nodded slowly. If you go alone, they will crush you. But if I come forward, maybe we stand a chance. I studied him for a long time, the man who had betrayed my sister, who had betrayed me. Part of me wanted to spit in his face. Another part of me knew he was right. I turned away, my voice cold. Think about what kind of man you want to die as, detective. Because I am not done. I walked out into the night air, my heart pounding, the weight of his words pressing on me. The truth was finally unraveling, but it came with a shadow. A shadow of men who still had power, men who had killed before and could kill again. And now I was on their radar. I drove back from Hayes' house with the kind of tension that sits in your throat and makes it hard to breathe. The steering wheel was slick under my palms from sweat, even though the night air was cold enough to fog my windshield. Every few blocks I checked my rearview mirror, convinced someone was following me. Sometimes I thought I saw headlights lingering too long, only for them to turn off down another street. Other times the streets were empty, but emptiness felt just as dangerous. By the time I pulled into the underground garage of my apartment building, it was close to midnight. Usually, I liked the stillness of the garage, the way the fluorescent lights hummed softly and the air smelled faintly of oil and rain. Tonight it felt like a tomb. My footsteps echoed too loud against the concrete as I walked toward the elevator. I popped the trunk to grab my bag. The sound of it slamming shut bounced through the garage like a gunshot. I froze. That was when I heard it. A soft scuff, like the drag of a shoe against concrete. I turned slowly, my heart pounding. At first I saw nothing, just rows of silent cars gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Then my eyes caught movement. A figure half hidden behind a pillar, standing too still, too deliberate. Hello? My voice cracked slightly as it echoed. The man stepped forward just enough that I could see the edge of his dark hoodie, the broad set of his shoulders. He didn't speak, didn't move closer. He just stood there watching me. Can I help you? I tried again, forcing my voice to sound steady. Still nothing. Then, without a word, he lifted one hand and pressed his finger to his lips. A silent warning. My chest constricted. He lowered his hand, turned, and walked calmly into the shadows between cars. Within seconds, he was gone. I stood frozen, my pulse hammering in my ears. The garage suddenly felt vast and suffocating at the same time. I clutched my keys like a weapon, sprinted toward the elevator, and jabbed the button repeatedly until the doors slid open. When they closed behind me, I pressed my back against the wall, gasping for air. Inside my apartment, I locked every bolt, latched every chain. I even dragged a chair in front of the door, as if that thin piece of wood could protect me. I sat on the floor for an hour, my ears straining for footsteps in the hall, my eyes flicking toward every shadow that moved across the curtains. When I finally crawled into bed, sleep didn't come. Every sound in the building made me flinch. The pipes groaning, a neighbor's door shutting, the hum of the refrigerator, it all sounded like someone trying to get in. I lay there staring at the ceiling until the sky outside turned gray. The next morning, I dragged myself back to the hospital, running on coffee and nerves. I forced myself to act normal, to greet the nurses and review charts as though my hands weren't still trembling. When I stepped into Michael's room, he was awake. His eyes caught mine immediately, sharp despite the weakness in his body. You look scared, he said. I tried to smile. Just tired. No, his voice was quiet but certain. You saw them, didn't you? I stiffened. What do you mean? He shifted slightly, grimacing at the pain. They watch, they always watch. When I was a kid, I used to see them outside the window. Men in cars, men on the street. I knew if I talked, they would come. My chest tightened. Michael wasn't guessing. He understood this game better than I did. Michael, I need you to tell me everything. Who are they? He shook his head violently, his face pale. I cannot. If I say it out loud, it will make it real. If I say their name, it will be over. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. They already know. Someone followed me last night. His eyes widened with terror. Then you have to stop. Please, you have to let it go. I shook my head. I cannot. Claire deserves the truth, and so do you. He grabbed my hand weakly, his grip trembling. Do you not understand? They will kill you too. Before I could answer, there was a knock on the door. A nurse peeked her head in. Dr. Reed, there is a call for you on line 3. I squeezed Michael's hand once and stood. I'll be back. In the hallway, I picked up the nearest phone. Hello? For a moment, all I heard was static. Then a man's voice, low and steady. You should have listened to your father. My blood ran cold. Who is this? The voice ignored me. Some things are better left alone. I swallowed hard. What do you want? A pause, then the words that made my stomach drop. Walk away, Dr. Reed, or we will bury you next to her. The line went dead. I stood there frozen, the receiver pressed to my ear long after the call had ended. My hand shook as I set it back on the hook. For the first time since Claire's death, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel in years, pure, unfiltered fear. That night I sat at my kitchen table with every light in the apartment blazing. Hayes' folder lay open in front of me, the coroner's report, the autopsy sketches, his notes scrawled in the margins. My fingers traced the circled wound on Claire's skull, the word accident scribbled across it like a curse. The phone call had confirmed it. I wasn't imagining shadows. They were real. Someone was watching. Someone had decided I was a problem. Hayes' voice echoed in my mind. If you go alone, they will crush you. I hated him for the cover-up, for letting Claire's truth rot in silence for 15 years. But he was right about one thing. If I stood alone, they would destroy me. I picked up my phone and dialed the number he had scribbled on a scrap of paper when I left his house. It rang twice before he answered, his voice groggy but sharp. Evelyn, they called me, I whispered, they know. There was a pause, long and heavy. I told you this would happen. So what do? His voice hardened. You either walk away or you fight back. But if you fight, you need me. I closed my eyes, seeing Claire's smile in my mind. I am not walking away. Then we fight, he said. But you have to be ready for what that means. I opened my eyes, staring at the shadows cast by the lamp on the wall. I have been ready for 15 years. I did not sleep that night after the call. I tried lying down, I tried closing my eyes, but the second the room went dark, my mind filled with images of Claire's face, Michael's trembling words, and the shadowed man in the garage pressing his finger to his lips. At 3 a.m, I sat at my kitchen table with every light in the apartment burning. Hayes' thin folder lay open in front of me, pages scattered across the surface like pieces of a puzzle with half the edges missing. I traced my finger over the autopsy sketch, over the faint circle around the scar, over the word accident scribbled above it as if someone thought that would erase the truth. When dawn broke, pale light spilling through the blinds, I had made my decision. I picked up my phone and dialed Hayes' number with hands that shook more than I wanted to admit. He answered quickly, his voice gravelly but awake like he had been expecting the call. Evelyn, they called me, I said. They know I am digging. A pause. I told you they would. I am not stopping. He was silent for so long I thought the line had gone dead. Then he said, meet me, not at my house, too obvious. Silver Lake Diner off Route 41. Noon. How do I know I can trust you? I asked. You don't. His voice was flat, but you called me anyway. He hung up before I could answer. The hours until noon crawled by. I tried to focus on rounds at the hospital, on checking charts and giving orders, but my concentration slipped constantly. Every time a nurse spoke my name, I jumped. Every time the overhead intercom buzzed, my pulse spiked. By the time I pulled into the diner's cracked parking lot, I felt like my nerves were stretched so thin they might snap. The Silver Lake Diner was the kind of place that hadn't changed in decades. The neon sign buzzed faintly, half the letters burned out. Inside, the air smelled of bacon grease and burnt coffee, and the vinyl booths were cracked from years of use. A waitress with tired eyes poured endless cups of coffee for men in work boots and flannel jackets. It was the sort of place no one paid much attention to anyone else, which was exactly why Hayes had chosen it. He was already there, sitting in a booth near the back. He looked smaller than I remembered, hunched over his coffee cup with his shoulders rounded forward. His hair was thin, his jaw covered in gray stubble, his suit jacket worn at the cuffs. But when he looked up and saw me, his eyes were still sharp, calculating. You came, he said. You asked, I replied, sliding into the seat across from him. He studied me for a long moment before speaking again. You look like hell. I forced a bitter laugh. I could say the same. He didn't smile. Instead, he reached into his coat and slid an envelope across the table. I stared at it for a second before pulling it toward me with hesitant hands. Inside were photographs. Old, grainy, black and white. My breath caught as I flipped through them. Claire. My Claire. One photo showed her on the sidewalk, camera hanging from her neck, her face turned toward something out of frame. Another showed her crouched behind a car, the camera half raised, her expression tense. In another, she was blurred mid-movement as though she had been running. I felt tears sting my eyes. "Where did you get these?" "I took them," Hayes said quietly. That night, she was following people she should not have. She snapped pictures of a deal, drugs, money, men you do not want to cross. My voice shook. "You were there?" He nodded once. I was supposed to be watching from a distance. She wasn't part of it. She just stumbled in at the wrong time, so they killed her. He didn't answer right away. He took a long sip of coffee, his hand trembling slightly as he set the cup down. They saw her. They chased her. By the time I reached her, it was already done. I gripped the photographs until my knuckles went white, and then you buried it. His jaw tightened. They told me to close it, to write it up as an accident. If you didn't, what? His eyes flickered with something I couldn't name, shame, maybe, or fear. If I didn't, my family was next. My wife, my kids. I wanted to scream, to throw the photographs at his face. Instead, my voice came out low and sharp. "So you chose them over her." His voice cracked. "I had no choice. There is always a choice. You let her die twice." He slammed his fist against the table hard enough to rattle the cups. "You think I don't know that? You think I don't see her face every damn night? I see yours too, standing there in your parents' living room, begging me to believe you. I see it every time I close my eyes." I stared at him, breathless with anger and grief. For years I had pictured this moment, confronting him, demanding answers. Now that it was here, it felt like my chest was splitting open. I asked, my voice quieter now, "Why are you helping me? After all this time, why now?" He rubbed his face with both hands, looking older than ever. "Because you already stirred the nest. They know your name now. They will not stop. And because," his voice faltered, "I'm tired of hiding." I studied him carefully. He looked like a man broken by his own choices, a man who had tried to protect what he loved and destroyed someone else's in the process. I wanted to hate him, I still did. But I also knew he was the only one who could help me. "What do they want?" I asked. "Control, fear, silence. That's how they've survived this long. And now your patient threatens that silence." My stomach dropped. "Michael, they'll go after him too." Hayes nodded grimly. "If they think he remembers too much, yes." "No," I whispered. "I won't let them." He gave a humorless laugh. "You talk like you have power in this." I straightened in my seat. "I have more than you think. I am not a scared teenager anymore." His eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time something like respect flickered there. "If you want to fight them, you need proof, not suspicions, not memories. Proof, photographs, records, witnesses, something they can't bury. Then we find it," I said firmly. His mouth curved into something that might have been the shadow of a smile. "Once we start, there's no going back." I leaned closer, my voice steady. "I already went back 15 years ago. I am not doing it again." We sat there in silence for a long time, the sounds of the diner fading into the background, the clink of silverware, the hiss of the grill, the low hum of conversation. For a moment, it felt like the world outside had narrowed to just the two of us, bound together by guilt and determination. Finally, Hayes stood, dropping a few bills on the table. "I'll be in touch." "Stay alert." I gathered the photographs back into the envelope, my hands trembling. As I drove back to the hospital, the envelope sat heavy on the passenger seat beside me. Claire's frozen expression stared up at me from the grainy images, a silent reminder of what had been stolen. When I stepped into Michael's room later, he looked at me with wide, searching eyes. "You found something, didn't you?" I sat down, taking his hand gently. "Yes, and I am not giving up." He closed his eyes, whispering, "Then neither am I." For the first time in 15 years, I felt like I wasn't alone in this fight. Hayes called me 3 nights later. His voice was tense, clipped, the way I imagined it used to be when he was still active on the force. "We need to move," he said. "Tonight." "Where?" "The precinct, archives." My chest tightened. "We can't just walk into a police station," "And we can," he interrupted. "I still have access. Old codes, old favors, they haven't erased me yet." I paused, staring at the envelope of Claire's photographs that never left my kitchen table. "Why now?" "Because if they're watching you, they'll be watching me too. If we wait, files will disappear." "They always do." I agreed, though fear coiled in my stomach. The precinct looked different at night, hollow and quiet, its halls echoing with the hum of fluorescent lights. I followed Hayes through side corridors, past locked doors and dusty windows. He moved with surprising confidence for a man his age, as though muscle memory had never left him. We reached a heavy door marked records. Hayes swiped a card, typed in a code. The lock clicked open. He pushed the door wide, gesturing for me to enter. The room smelled like old paper and ink, shelves stretching wall to wall with files. Hayes flicked on a desk lamp, its circle of yellow light falling on stacks of folders. He rubbed his hands together. "All right." Claire's case should be under closed homicides, year 15 years back, if it's still here. I moved quickly, scanning labels, pulling drawers. My fingers trembled as I rifled through file after file. Hayes worked on the other side of the room, muttering under his breath. Then I saw it. Read, Claire, thin, almost empty. I pulled it out with shaking hands. Inside were the same autopsy sketches, a few grainy scene photos, and Hayes' notes. Nothing new. Damn it, I whispered. This isn't enough. Hayes came over, peering at the folder. They cleaned it. I knew they would. I looked at him sharply. Then why bring me here? Because sometimes, he said quietly, they miss things. We searched deeper. Hours slipped by. My eyes burned from reading faded handwriting, my hands blackened with dust. Then, tucked behind another folder, I found it. A small plastic evidence bag. Inside was a strip of film, undeveloped. My heart raced. What's this? Hayes took it, his face tightening. Claire's film roll. They never logged it. I grabbed his arm. Why didn't you turn this in? His voice was low. Because if I did, it would have been destroyed. My hands shook as I held the bag. This could be it. Proof. Hayes' eyes met mine, hard and grim. We need to get it developed. Carefully. Quietly. I nodded, slipping the bag into my pocket. We left the archives as silently as we had entered. But as we stepped out into the cool night air, I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Car was idling across the street, headlights off. Too still, too deliberate. Hayes noticed too. Keep walking, he muttered. Don't look. We reached my car. He leaned in close, his voice a whisper. They're watching us. I swallowed hard. Then what do? We do what your sister tried to do, he said. We show the world. I drove home with my hands gripping the wheel so tightly they ached. The evidence bag in my pocket felt heavier than anything I'd ever carried. Claire's last roll of film. Maybe the truth she died for. Back in my apartment, I locked the door, shut the curtains, and sat at the table staring at it. My hands trembled as I whispered to the empty room. Claire, what did you see? I didn't know yet, but I would find out. Even if it killed me. The strip of film sat on my kitchen table all night like it was alive. I could not take my eyes off it. I left it under the lamp, sealed in its little plastic bag, staring at it the way a child stares at a locked box and imagines the treasures inside. Except I was not imagining treasure. I was imagining ghosts, Claire's ghosts. I imagined her hands fumbling with the roll that night, her camera clutched to her chest, the sound of her breathing fast and shallow as she ran from something she should never have seen. Did she know? Did she know that this strip of film would outlive her? That someone would find it one day, that someone would hold it 15 years later and pray it held the truth. By the time the first sunlight crept through my blinds, I was still at the table, the evidence bag untouched in front of me. My coffee had gone cold hours ago. My legs ached from sitting so long, but I could not move. If I took it to any normal lab, it would vanish. Someone would call someone else, and the roll would disappear into a drawer or a shredder. Hayes was right about one thing. These men had reach, too much reach, so I thought of Natalie. My anchor in the hospital, the only person who knew the real story, at least pieces of it. She was cautious, yes, but she was loyal. And more than that, I remembered her telling me years ago about her brother's little shop downtown. He ran a print and framing business, mostly for artists and students, but he had kept the old darkroom in the back because he loved photography. He had learned it in college and never gave it up. I called her as soon as I heard her voicemail click off. She picked up on the second ring, her voice groggy. Evelyn, do you realize it is barely 7? I swallowed hard. I need your help. Urgent. There was silence on the line. She must have heard the tremor in my voice. What is going on? Please, Natalie, just trust me. Another pause, then she sighed. All right. Where? 2 hours later, I was standing in the cramped, dimly lit back room of her brother's shop. The air smelled faintly of chemical baths and damp paper. The single red lamp cast a glow that made everything feel like a dream, or a nightmare. Natalie stood beside me, her arms crossed, her eyes never leaving me. Her brother Daniel was tall, with quiet eyes and ink stains on his fingers. He looked at the bag in my hands and then at me. What's on it? He asked. Just photos, I said, my throat dry. Old ones. I need them developed, but I can't risk a normal lab. Daniel studied me for a long moment. Then he shrugged. I don't need to know the story. Just hand me the film. I hesitated. My fingers didn't want to let go of the bag, as if once I surrendered it, I would lose Claire again. Finally, I forced myself to place it in his hand. Please, be careful. Always am, he murmured, already moving with practiced motions. The process was slow, deliberate. Daniel worked in silence, dipping the strip into chemicals, clipping it to dry, cutting, placing, transferring. I could hear the drip of liquid, the soft rustle of paper, the hum of an old ventilation fan overhead. Each sound stretched time until minutes felt like hours. Natalie sat on a stool, watching me more than she watched her brother. "Evelyn, you're pale," I forced a laugh. "I haven't slept." "No kidding." She leaned forward. "Whatever this is, it's more than just old photos." I met her eyes, swallowing hard. "It's everything." Before she could ask more, Daniel began sliding the first wet prints onto the rack. Shapes blurred and then sharpened under the red glow. My breath caught in my chest as shadows became lines, lines became figures. The first photo showed a car parked on a dark street. Its headlights were off. 3 men stood near the trunk, one holding a package, another passing something folded like money. My pulse quickened. Drug deal. Exactly what Hayes had said. The second photo came into focus slowly. It was closer, taken from behind some kind of barrier, maybe a car or a dumpster. One of the men's faces was visible, turned slightly toward the camera. My stomach lurched violently. It was Hayes, not the old, tired man I had seen slumped in his chair with whiskey in his hand. Younger, stronger, alert. His jaw tight, his eyes sharp, his presence unmistakable. My knees felt weak. Natalie looked between me and the photo, her brow furrowed. "Evelyn, is that?" "Yes," I whispered, my voice shaking. "That's him." Daniel said nothing, carefully laying down the next print. The third photo froze me in place. A taller man, broad-shouldered, stood near the car. Something metallic glinted in his hand. A gun. His face was clearer than I wanted. Rugged features, a scar near his brow, eyes hard and merciless. I did not recognize him, but my gut twisted with certainty. This was the man Michael had seen. The bad man. I staggered back, gripping the edge of the table. My breath came fast and shallow. The fourth photo blurred at first, then sharpened into something that made my stomach drop. It was Claire, my little sister. Caught mid-run, her hair wild around her face, her camera clutched in both hands, her eyes wide, mouth open as if calling out. Even in black and white, even through the grain, I could feel her fear. I pressed a hand to my mouth, a sob breaking free before I could stop it. Natalie's hand was on my shoulder in an instant. "Evelyn." I shook my head, staring at the photo until my vision blurred with tears. She was right there. She had been so close to making it out, so close to surviving. Daniel laid down one more print. I forced myself to look. It showed the tall man again, this time grabbing Claire's arm. She twisted, trying to pull away. The camera strap swung loose from her shoulder. The man's face was angled toward her, twisted with rage. The room spun around me. I stumbled back into the stool, gasping for air. Natalie knelt in front of me, gripping my hands. "Evelyn, listen to me. These photos, they're proof. You have what you need," but all I could see was Claire's face. Daniel cleared his throat. "You need to get these out of here. If anyone knows I developed them," I wiped my face with trembling hands, nodding. "Thank you, both of you." Natalie helped me gather the prints, slipping them into a large envelope. Her eyes were fierce when she spoke. "Whatever this is, I am with you. Do not push me away." I looked at her, my throat tight. "You don't know what you're saying. These people, they kill." "Then let them try," she snapped. "You are not doing this alone." I clutched the envelope to my chest as we stepped out of the darkroom. The late afternoon light stabbed at my eyes, too bright, too sharp. I half expected men in dark cars to be waiting outside. But the street was quiet. For now. As I slid into my car, the envelope heavy on the passenger seat, I whispered to myself, "Claire, we have you now. We have the truth." But even as I said it, I knew truth alone wasn't enough. Truth was dangerous. Truth could get me killed. I drove home with the envelope on the passenger seat, my hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. Every stoplight felt like a trap, every passing car like a threat. I checked the rearview mirror constantly, convinced I would see a dark sedan tailing me, headlights steady, waiting for me to slip. But the road stayed strangely empty, almost too quiet, as if the city itself was holding its breath. When I pulled into my apartment building, I didn't go straight upstairs. I parked in a different spot, circled the garage twice on foot, eyes darting to every shadow. The silence pressed down on me like a weight. When I finally convinced myself it was safe, I hurried inside, clutching the envelope to my chest like it was my own heartbeat. Inside, I locked every bolt, pulled the curtains tight, and spread the photographs across my kitchen table. Claire's terrified face stared back at me, frozen in black and white, her last moments captured forever. The tall man with the gun, the exchange of money and drugs, Hayes himself caught in the act, it was all there, undeniable. Proof. Proof that could rip open 15 years of lies. Proof that could finally give Claire justice. But proof that dangerous didn't stay secret for long. My phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. I hesitated, then picked up. A man's voice, low and calm. "We know what you have." My mouth went dry. "It would be wise to hand it over," the voice continued. "Before someone else gets hurt." I forced my voice to stay steady. "Who are you?" The man chuckled softly. "You already know." The line went dead. I stood frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear, every nerve in my body screaming. They knew. Somehow, they already knew. Maybe someone had seen me at the shop. Maybe someone was watching Natalie or Daniel or Hayes. Maybe it didn't matter how careful we were. My first instinct was to run. Pack a bag, take the photographs, disappear. But then I thought of Michael, lying in that hospital bed, already terrified. If they knew about me, they knew about him. I called Hayes. He answered on the first ring. "They called me," I said. "They know." His voice was grim. "Of course they do. Word travels fast. What do we do?" There was a pause, then he said, "First, we protect the boy. Whatever happens, he can't be left alone." I felt a surge of panic. "He's in the hospital. He's vulnerable." Hayes' tone sharpened. "Then go to him." Now, I grabbed the envelope, shoved the photos back inside, and ran out the door. The drive to the hospital felt endless. Every stop sign, every slow pedestrian, every red light made my skin crawl. I imagined cars pulling up beside me, men with guns stepping out. But somehow I made it. When I entered Michael's room, he looked up instantly, his eyes wide, sensing something was wrong. "You found something, didn't you?" I nodded, pulling a chair close to his bed. "Michael, listen to me. They know, they called me. That means they'll come for you too." His face went pale. "I told you they always watch." I grabbed his hand. "We're not letting them touch you. Not this time." Hayes appeared 10 minutes later, moving with surprising speed for a man his age. He carried a worn leather bag slung over his shoulder. He glanced at the photos I had spread on Michael's bedside table, his face hardening. "So it's true, she caught everything." I glared at him. "Including you." His jaw tightened. "I told you I was there. I was ordered to be there." "But this," he tapped the photo of the tall man with the gun, "this is who we need. That's the enforcer. He's the one who killed her." "Do you know his name?" I asked. Hayes hesitated, then nodded. "Marcus Vega, ex-military. He's been muscle for the cartel for 20 years. Ruthless. If he's in these photos, they'll kill to get them back." Michael's voice was a whisper. "He's the man I saw when I was little. I remember his face." Hayes and I exchanged a look. The truth was aligning piece by piece, but it meant the danger was doubling. "We can't stay here," Hayes said. "Hospitals aren't safe. Too many doors, too many people." "He's recovering from brain surgery," I shot back. "We can't just move him." "If we don't," Hayes said flatly, "they'll move him for us." The thought made my blood run cold. That night, I stayed by Michael's side. I pulled a chair to the corner of his room, the photographs hidden in my bag, my eyes fixed on the door. Every creak of the floor in the hallway, every shadow passing under the crack made my heart race. Twice I thought I saw someone lingering outside, but when I opened the door, the hall was empty. At 2 a.m, Michael stirred. "Evelyn," I went to him. "What is it?" He swallowed hard, his voice trembling. "They're here." My stomach dropped. "How do you know?" His eyes were glassy with fear. "I can feel it." And then the lights in the hallway flickered. I grabbed the phone on the wall, hitting the button for security, but the line was dead. My breath caught. This wasn't paranoia. They were already inside. I looked at Michael, my heart pounding. "Hold on. We're not letting them take you." But deep down, I wasn't sure how much longer we could hold them off. The hallway lights flickered again, buzzing faintly, like a warning whispered through the building's veins. I stood frozen at Michael's bedside, one hand clutching the phone that had gone dead, the other pressed against the strap of my bag where the photographs lay hidden. My heart thundered so hard it drowned out every other sound. Michael's eyes were wide, his face pale in the dim light. "They're here," he whispered again, his voice breaking. I forced myself to move. "Stay quiet. Stay still." The fluorescent light above the door hummed, then went dark completely, plunging the room into shadow. I swallowed the panic clawing at my throat. Hospitals never lost power like this, not without backup generators humming on within seconds. This wasn't an outage, this was control. The door handle rattled. I lunged forward, locking it, pressing my back to the wood as if my weight alone could keep them out. My fingers trembled, but I kept my voice low, steady for Michael's sake. "It's okay, we're okay." But I didn't believe it. A heavy thud hit the door, then another. Someone testing, pressing. I heard muffled voices in the hallway, low and deliberate, the cadence of men who didn't belong in a hospital. Then Hayes' voice cut through the darkness. "Open up, it's me." Relief hit me like a wave, but I hesitated. "How do I know?" I hissed through the door. "Because if I were them, we wouldn't be talking," he said. I unlocked the door, yanking it open just enough to see Hayes' lined face in the dim light. He slipped inside quickly, closing it behind him. His pistol gleamed faintly in his hand. "Jesus," I muttered. He met my eyes, voice grim. "We don't have much time." Michael whimpered softly. "They're out there." Hayes crouched by him. "I know, kid, but you're safe. We'll get you out. Safe." The word felt fragile like glass in my mouth. Another thud at the door, this one harder. Hayes lifted his pistol, his expression stone. Back away. Both of you. I pulled Michael's bed slightly, positioning myself between him and the door. My hands shook as I tightened my grip on the strap of the bag. The handle twisted violently, then the door shuddered as a boot slammed against it. The thin lock rattled. Hayes braced himself, whispering they'll try to flush us out. Almost on cue, the fire alarm shrieked to life. Red strobes flashed in the hall, painting everything in bursts of crimson. Smoke curled under the door, acrid and chemical, not fire. Gas. Michael coughed, his face twisting in pain. Hayes grabbed my arm. We have to move. Now. I hesitated, torn between fear and fury. They wanted us to run, to stumble into their trap. But staying meant choking to death. I nodded once. Okay, let's go. Hayes yanked open the door. The hallway was chaos, patients being wheeled out by frantic nurses, alarms blaring, shadows moving too quickly among the crowd. Men who didn't belong. Stay close, Hayes barked, pushing forward. I clutched the bed rail, guiding Michael as we moved. My heart pounded with every step, every burst of red light flashing across strange faces. Twice I caught sight of dark figures in the smoke, moving with intent, not panic, hunters in the herd. We reached a side corridor. Hayes shoved open a supply closet, motioning us inside. We squeezed in, the small space thick with the smell of bleach and latex gloves. Michael wheezed softly. Evelyn, I can't, I pressed my hand to his cheek. You can, you have to. Hayes listened at the door, his jaw tight. They're sweeping the floor. 2, maybe 3 of them. Who are they? I whispered. Cartel men, he said flatly. Hired muscle, they'll clean up anyone in their way. My stomach twisted. Nurses, patients, innocents. Hayes met my eyes, reading my fear. They don't care. The door handle rattled, my breath caught. Hayes lifted his pistol, motioning me to stay back. The knob twisted once, twice, then stilled. Footsteps receded. We waited in suffocating silence. Finally Hayes whispered, we can't stay here. There's a service elevator at the end of the hall. If we make it, we can get to the garage. And then what? I demanded. He looked at me, hard and steady. Then we disappear. The idea of disappearing made bile rise in my throat. I thought of Claire's photographs, the truth sealed in my bag. I thought of the threat on the phone, the voice promising to bury me beside her. Disappearing meant silence. Disappearing meant letting them win. No, I whispered fiercely, not this time. Hayes studied me for a beat, then nodded. First we survive, then we fight. We waited until the alarm blared louder, the chaos in the hall swelling. Hayes cracked the door open, peering out. Clear. We pushed Michael's bed into the hall, moving quickly but carefully. My heart raced as I scanned every doorway, every shape in the smoke. A nurse ran past us, eyes wide with panic, pushing an elderly man in a wheelchair. She didn't even look our way. Halfway down the hall, I saw him. A tall man, broad-shouldered, scar near his brow, the same man from the photograph, Marcus Vega. His eyes locked onto mine instantly, cold and merciless. Run, I hissed. Hayes shoved the bed forward, his pistol raised. Vega moved fast, closing the distance, his hand slipping beneath his jacket. A shot rang out. The glass panel of a nearby door shattered, showering the floor. Screams erupted. Hayes fired back, the recoil jerking his arm. People scattered, ducking, crying out. I pushed Michael's bed with everything I had, my muscles screaming. We turned a corner, the service elevator ahead like a glowing beacon. Behind us, boots pounded against the tile. Hayes fired again, shouting go. I slammed the elevator button, praying the doors would open in time. Seconds stretched into eternity. Finally, with a groan, the doors slid wide. We shoved Michael inside. Hayes stumbled in behind us, his face slick with sweat, pistol still raised. The doors closed just as Vega's shadow fell across the hall. His eyes met mine through the narrowing gap, and he smiled. The elevator descended into darkness. I pressed Michael's hand in mine, my voice trembling. We're okay. We're okay. But I knew it wasn't over. Not even close, because Marcus Vega had seen me, and he wasn't smiling like a man who had lost. He was smiling like a man who had just begun to hunt. The elevator carried us down into the bowels of the hospital like a coffin sinking into the earth. I could hear the cables strain and groan, could feel the vibration in my legs. Every second I expected the doors to slide open and reveal Vega standing there, smiling that cold smile, gun in hand. But when they opened at last, it was only the underground garage. The vast space stretched out before us, concrete pillars, rows of silent cars, and shadows thick enough to choke on. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of oil and exhaust. It was too quiet. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights above seemed faint. Hayes stepped out first, pistol raised, scanning the lot with a quick, sharp glance. Clear, he muttered. For now. I pushed Michael's bed out, the wheels squeaking far too loud against the floor. Each echo bounced off the concrete like a flare announcing our presence. My chest tightened with every sound. Michael was pale, beads of sweat on his forehead, his breathing shallow from the effort of being moved. His eyes darted around like a trapped animal. I cannot do this," he whispered. I crouched quickly beside him, gripping his trembling hands. "Look at me, Michael. You already survived the surgery. You survived them once as a kid. You're stronger than you think, but you have to hold on." For me, his chest heaved, but he nodded barely. Hayes had already reached his car, a beat-up sedan tucked into the farthest corner. He popped the trunk, pulling out a folded wheelchair and opening it with the ease of a man who had done this 100 times. "Help me," he barked. Together, we lifted Michael carefully into the chair. He winced, groaning softly, but never screamed. Hayes tossed the hospital bed aside with little ceremony, like it was just another obstacle in our way. He shoved the chair into the back seat, then turned to me. "Get in. Now." I climbed in, my bag clutched tight to my chest. The photographs pressed against me like a second heartbeat, each image carrying Claire's voice, her last moments. Hayes started the engine, the roar far too loud in the garage. He slammed the car into gear, tires screeching as we tore out into the night. For the first few miles, none of us spoke. My eyes flicked constantly to the rearview mirror, certain I would see headlights appear, a black sedan gaining on us, Vega inside with that cold, merciless smile. But the streets were empty, too empty, like the whole city had been warned to clear the way. Finally, Hayes broke the silence. "We can't go back. Not to the hospital, not to your apartment." I turned on him, my voice sharp. "Then where do we go?" "Somewhere they won't think to look," he said flatly. "Somewhere off the grid." Michael stirred weakly beside me. "They'll find us," he whispered. "They always do." I gripped his hand tightly. "Not if we stay ahead. Not if we don't give them a chance." Hayes' knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "I know a place. Old hunting cabin up north near the state line, belonged to a friend who's gone now. Nobody uses it. No neighbors, no power." I stared at him, suspicion rising. "And why should I trust you to lead us there?" His jaw tightened. "Because you don't have another option." I wanted to scream at him, to throw the words in his face. But he was right. The hospital was compromised, my apartment useless, the police corrupt or blind. There was nowhere else to run, so I nodded once sharp. "Fine, we go." The city bled away behind us. Neon lights and crowded streets faded into the long, dark stretches of highway. Buildings thinned, then vanished, replaced by silent fields and distant forests. The further we drove, the more the world seemed to shrink, as though we were leaving civilization itself. Michael shifted in his seat, wincing with each bump in the road. His voice was faint. "How much further?" Hayes glanced at him in the mirror. 2 hours. Maybe 3, depends on the back roads. 2 hours felt like an eternity. Every car we passed set my nerves on fire. Every pair of headlights in the distance felt like hunters closing in. After an hour, Hayes pulled off the main highway onto a narrow country road. The darkness deepened, no street lamps, only the twin beams of our headlights cutting through the trees. The forest closed in on both sides, thick and impenetrable. I broke the silence, my voice low. "Tell me the truth, Hayes. Why help me now?" He didn't answer at first, his eyes fixed on the road. Finally, he said, "Because I owe her. Because every day since that night, I've seen your sister's face. And because if I don't do this now, I'll die knowing I let her down twice." The words hung heavy in the car. I wanted to believe him, but belief was dangerous. Trust was dangerous. Still, something in his voice felt cracked, raw, unpolished. Not rehearsed, not a lie. Michael stirred again, his voice was a whisper. "He's right, Evelyn. Sometimes people are broken, but they still try." I squeezed his hand. "Rest, Michael, save your strength." Hayes drove us deeper into the night. The air grew colder, mist curling low across the road. When we finally turned down a gravel path, the crunch beneath the tires was deafening. At the end of the path stood a cabin, small and hunched, its windows dark, its wood weathered with age. It looked forgotten, swallowed by the forest. Hayes killed the engine. For a moment, the silence was absolute. No birds, no wind, just the echo of our own breathing. "Here," he said. We got Michael inside, settling him on a worn couch that sagged under his weight. I lit a lantern from a shelf, its glow soft but steady, casting long shadows across the cabin's single room. The walls smelled of pine and dust. I set my bag on the table, the photographs still inside. Hayes sat across from me, his pistol never far from reach. Michael lay with his eyes half closed, whispering faintly in his sleep. For the first time since Claire's death, I felt completely cut off from the world. No phones, no electricity, no neighbors to hear us scream. We were alone. And in that silence, I finally admitted what I had known all along. The net wasn't just closing, it was already around us. The cabin was swallowed in silence once Hayes killed the engine. Even after we carried Michael inside and settled him on the sagging couch, even after I lit the old lantern that filled the room with a trembling yellow glow, the silence didn't break. It clung to the walls, heavy and thick, pressing down on my chest until I could barely breathe. Michael was pale and restless, his body too fragile for this kind of escape. He muttered occasionally in his sleep, his lips forming half-words I couldn't catch. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and every so often he whimpered, his body twitching like he was still being hunted even in dreams. Hayes sat by the door, his pistol on the table in front of him, his shoulders hunched forward. His eyes moved constantly, flicking to the window, the door, the shadows shifting with the lantern light. He didn't speak, didn't even look at me for the longest time. I sat across from him, clutching the bag that held the photographs against my chest like armor. My fingers trembled around the strap, my thoughts circling endlessly. What if they had followed us? What if they were already out there, waiting in the trees? What if Vega had smiled like that because he knew exactly where we'd run? Finally, I broke the silence. How long do you think we have? Hayes didn't look up. Not long. That wasn't the answer I wanted. Not long could mean minutes, hours, a day. Not long could mean they were already circling the cabin. I pressed harder. Then why bring us here? Because running forever isn't possible, he said flatly. Out here we buy time. Time to think. Time to plan. My throat tightened. And when that time runs out, his eyes finally met mine, sharp and unflinching. Then we fight. I wanted to scream at him. Fight with what? A gun, a handful of photographs, and a woman who hadn't held anything more dangerous than a scalpel in her life? But the anger twisted into something else before it could escape my lips. Because somewhere deep down, I knew he was right. Sooner or later, this would end in blood. The only question was whose. Michael stirred then, groaning softly. His eyes fluttered open, glazed but searching. Where are we? I leaned over him quickly, brushing damp hair from his forehead. You're safe. We're in a cabin, far from the city. No one can find us here. He shook his head weakly. They always find me. No, I whispered fiercely, not this time. His eyes met mine, wide and fearful. If they catch me, they'll kill me. I squeezed his hand, then we won't let them. Hayes spoke quietly from across the room. The boy isn't wrong. Vega doesn't let loose ends live. I shot him a glare. Do you think this helps? Hayes leaned back, his jaw tight. Reality doesn't care about comfort. You wanted the truth. That's what it looks like. The room was too small for 3 people and that much grief. My head pounded, my chest felt tight, and suddenly I was on my feet, pacing the floor. I pressed my hands to my face, forcing myself to breathe. Claire's face floated in my mind, caught forever in those photographs. I saw her running, terrified, clutching her camera. I saw the man grabbing her arm. I saw her mouth open as if she were calling for me. I spun on Hayes. You could have stopped it. You were there. His face darkened, his voice low. I've told you. They had me cornered. You were the cop. She was a kid, my kid sister. His fist slammed against the table, the pistol rattling with the impact. You think I don't know that? You think I don't carry it every single day? The shout echoed through the cabin, startling Michael. He whimpered, curling in on himself. I rushed to him, shushing him softly, holding his hand until he calmed again. My voice shook as I looked back at Hayes. I will never forgive you. His shoulders sagged, his eyes closing for a moment. I'm not asking you to. For a long time, the only sound was Michael's uneven breathing and the faint hiss of the lantern. Then Hayes spoke again, quieter. But if you want to survive this, if you want him to survive this, and if you want your sister's death to mean something, you need me. Hate me all you want, but you need me. The truth of it cut deep. I hated him more than anyone, but he was right. He knew these men, knew how they worked, how they hunted, how they covered their tracks. Alone, I was just a doctor with too much anger and too many ghosts. With him, maybe we stood a chance. I sat back down slowly, staring at the photographs in my bag. Proof. The only thing that gave us power, but proof was worthless if we were dead. Michael's voice broke the silence again, faint and tired. Evelyn, I leaned close. I'm here. His eyes glistened in the dim light. Why are you doing this for me? You don't even know me. I felt my throat tighten, because I couldn't save her. But I can save you. Tears welled in his eyes. I don't want to die. You won't, I whispered fiercely. Not while I'm breathing. Hayes shifted in his chair, his eyes on me. We can't just wait here. They'll be planning their next move and we need to plan ours. I looked at him, exhaustion and rage boiling together in my chest. Then plan. Tell me what we do. He leaned forward, his face shadowed by the lantern light. We make the first move. My breath caught. You want us to go after them? If we sit here, they'll come to us. If we hit first, maybe, just maybe, we buy an advantage. The idea terrified me, but it also sparked something else. A flicker of control. For the first time since that phone call, since the man in the garage, since the night Claire died, I imagined not just surviving but fighting back. Michael coughed weakly, his voice barely above a whisper. If you fight, don't lose. I squeezed his hand again, my jaw set. We won't. But inside, I knew the storm was coming. We were 3 broken people in a cabin in the woods, hunted by men with power, money, and no mercy. And still, something inside me burned hotter than my fear. For the first time in 15 years, I was done running. The cabin was suffocating by the time the first streaks of gray daylight slid between the boards covering the windows. I had not slept. My body was heavy with exhaustion, but my mind refused to let me close my eyes. Every time I tried, I saw Claire's face, her hair wild, her camera clutched to her chest, her eyes wide with terror. Then I saw Vega's face, calm and cruel, smiling at me in the hospital corridor as if he already knew I belonged to him. The lantern had burned low during the night, leaving the room in a haze of flickering shadows. Hayes sat at the table, his pistol still in his hand, his eyes half closed but never fully asleep. Michael lay curled on the couch, his chest rising and falling unevenly, his lips twitching as if he was whispering in his dreams. I could not take the waiting anymore. The silence pressed down on me, crushing me until my skin felt too tight for my body. Finally I stood, pacing the floorboards, my boots creaking on the old wood. Hayes cracked one eye open, watching me. Sit down, he muttered. I shook my head, my voice sharp. I can't. I won't. We can't keep hiding like this. Hayes sat up straighter, rubbing his face with one hand. What do you want to do? Step outside and wave them in? Because that's what happens if we leave without a plan. My hands curled into fists. No, I want to hit back. His eyes opened fully then, sharp and searching. You mean it? I grabbed my bag from the table, pulling out the photographs. I spread them out under the dim light of the lantern, pushing them toward him. This is what they're afraid of, not me, not Michael. This. Proof. Claire caught them in the act, and it's enough to burn everything they built to the ground if it gets out. Hayes leaned forward, his weathered face etched with shadows. His gaze fell on the photo of Vega gripping Claire's arm, his gun visible at his side. His jaw tightened, his hand clenching slowly. He stayed silent for a long time before finally exhaling. You're right. This could do it, but not like this. I snapped, why not? It's their faces, their deal, their crime. Because photographs alone are easy to bury, he said firmly. They'll call them fakes, discredit you, smear you, and if that doesn't work, they'll put a bullet in your head before the ink dries. So what then? We need more records, names, accounts, something undeniable. Evidence they can't wash away. Michael stirred, groaning softly, his voice thin but steady. Do it. I turned to him quickly, kneeling by the couch. Michael, no, you need to rest, no, he whispered, shaking his head weakly. If you don't, they win. They'll kill me and they'll keep killing. You have to stop them. His words cut through me like a blade. He was just a boy who had spent his whole life running from shadows. He had already given too much, survived too much, and still he was urging us forward. I looked back at Hayes, my voice hard. Where do we get more? Hayes' expression was grim. There's a storage unit. Belonged to a man named O'Connor. He was their logistics guy, kept the books, the shipments, the drop schedules. Was, I pressed. Dead. Accident, they said, but I know better. They didn't burn everything. They never do. If we find his unit, there might be records, ledgers, maybe even photos, enough to back this up, enough to put Vega and his people in the ground. My stomach twisted with both fear and determination. Then we go. Hayes gave me a long look. You're a surgeon, not a soldier. You realize what you're saying? I leaned closer, my eyes locked on his. I've been fighting to save lives my whole career. Now I'm fighting to save my own. Don't underestimate me. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something like respect in his gaze. He nodded once. All right. But we do it smart. No phones, no trails, we go tonight. Michael coughed, shifting on the couch. His voice was weak but insistent. Take me. My heart lurched. Michael, you can barely stand. If you leave me here, he said, his eyes wide with fear, they'll find me. They'll kill me. I sat back, my throat tight. He was right. The cabin wasn't safe. Nowhere was safe. Hayes rubbed his jaw. Moving him is dangerous. He's too weak. Leaving him is worse, I snapped. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. Finally, Hayes nodded reluctantly. Then we all go. The plan formed slowly, piece by piece, as the day dragged on. Hayes sketched the rough layout of the unit on a scrap of paper. He talked about locks, security cameras, patrol routes. I listened, my mind buzzing, forcing myself to learn to adapt. I wasn't a detective, but I had precision. I had steady hands. And I had a reason stronger than fear. Michael drifted in and out of sleep, his hand clutching mine whenever he woke. Each time he whispered the same words. Don't let them win. When night fell, the cabin felt colder, the forest outside whispering with unseen life. I packed the photographs carefully into my bag, double-wrapped, secured against my chest. Hayes cleaned his pistol, slid extra rounds into his coat pocket. He handed me a small revolver, its weight unfamiliar and terrifying in my hands. "I can't," I said quietly. "You can," he replied, "because if you don't, you won't make it back." I stared at the gun, then at Michael sleeping fitfully on the couch. I thought of Claire again, running with her camera, unarmed, defenseless, and dying because of it. My hand stopped trembling as I closed around the grip. "Fine." Hayes gave me a sharp nod. "We move at midnight." As the lantern flickered low, I sat by the window, staring out into the endless black of the woods. Somewhere out there, Vega was waiting. Somewhere out there, the men who had killed Claire were preparing their next move. But this time, we weren't just waiting to be hunted. This time, we were going after them. Midnight wrapped around us like a noose as Hayes drove us through the black stretch of back roads. The cabin shrank into the distance, swallowed by the woods, until it was nothing more than a memory and a fear I carried in my bones. Michael sat beside me, weak but alert, his eyes fixed on the darkness outside the window like he was searching for ghosts. My bag pressed against my chest, the photographs inside heavy with the weight of 15 years. Hayes kept both hands on the wheel, his face etched in stone, his eyes darting to the mirrors every few seconds. No one followed. Or if they did, they were better hunters than I wanted to believe. When the industrial park came into view, I felt my stomach twist. Long rows of corrugated steel doors stretched into the distance under flickering lamps, the whole place silent except for the hum of an old transformer buzzing somewhere in the shadows. Hayes killed the engine a block away, parking under the broken light of a street lamp. "We walk from here," he said. "Quieter." We moved quickly, the crunch of gravel under our boots far too loud in the empty night. I pushed Michael's chair, his breath ragged with each bump in the path. He gripped the armrests tightly, forcing himself not to cry out. Every sound made me flinch, every shadow felt alive. The storage unit Hayes had marked was near the end of a row, its paint chipped, the lock rusted. He knelt, working the lock with tools he pulled from his jacket. His hands were steady, his face grim. Within seconds, the padlock clicked open. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust and neglect. Stacks of boxes lined the walls, some collapsing under their own weight. A row of old file cabinets stood against the back wall. Hayes flicked his flashlight on, its narrow beam cutting through the dark. He moved quickly, pulling open drawers, rifling through papers. I went to the shelves, my hands trembling as I lifted boxes down, coughing on the dust. Michael stayed close, his eyes flicking from shadow to shadow. Hayes' voice was low, sharp. "Here," I hurried to his side. He had opened a thick file, pages filled with neat handwriting, dates, codes, shipment logs. My heart raced. This was it, proof beyond photographs, records that could not be explained away. I pulled another box down, my fingers shaking as I opened it. Inside were ledgers, more shipments, lists of names. My chest tightened. Names I recognized from the hospital, from the police reports 15 years ago, names I thought had been ghosts. Michael whispered hoarsely from behind me, "I remember those numbers. I saw him write them once." "Vega." I turned to him, my throat tight. "You've just confirmed it." Hayes closed the file quickly. "That's enough. We have to go." Before the metallic slam of the unit door crashing down cut his words in half. The sound echoed like thunder, the thin light from outside gone in an instant. Darkness swallowed us whole. My heart stopped, then a voice filled the space. Smooth, cold, patient. "Dr. Reed?" "Vega." The hairs on my neck stood up. His voice carried the weight of certainty, like a predator who had already cornered his prey. Hayes hissed under his breath, "Stay down." The door screeched upward again, light flooding the space. Vega stood there in the opening, tall and broad, his scarred face half in shadow, his gun glinting under the lamp outside. Two men flanked him, each armed, each moving with deadly calm. Vega's eyes found me instantly. His mouth curved into that smile I had seen in the hospital hallway. "You look just like her." My stomach twisted. Rage surged up my throat. "Where were you when she begged for her life?" His smile didn't falter. Exactly where I was supposed to be. Hayes moved fast. He raised his pistol and fired. The crack split the air. One of Vega's men dropped instantly, clutching his chest. Chaos exploded. The second man swung his gun toward us. I grabbed Michael's chair, shoving it behind a stack of crates, throwing myself in front of him as bullets tore through the air. Sparks burst off the steel shelves, wood splintered, the sound deafening. Hayes ducked behind a cabinet, firing again. The second man went down, blood pooling across the concrete floor. Vega stepped forward calmly, unfazed, his gun steady in his hand. He fired once, the bullet slamming into the cabinet Hayes hid behind. Hayes grunted, stumbling, his shoulder bleeding, but he stayed on his feet. Vega's eyes locked on me again. His voice was smooth like ice. "Give me the photos, doctor, and I'll let you live." My chest heaved, my hands tightening around the bag. My voice came out low, steady, burning with 15 years of fury. "You'll never touch them." His smile widened. "Then I'll take them from your corpse." Hayes rose, firing twice. Vega dodged easily, the bullets sparking off the steel walls. He fired back. One shot grazed Hayes' arm, sending him sprawling behind the crate. Michael cried out, "Evelyn, run," but I didn't move. Something inside me burned hotter than fear. I stepped out from behind the crate, the revolver Hayes had given me heavy in my hand. Vega's eyes flicked to it, amused. "Brave, doctor, but bravery is nothing without aim." I raised the gun with both hands. My arms shook, my throat tight, but my eyes never left his face. Hayes' voice rasped from behind the cabinet. "Evelyn, don't," but I had already decided. I saw Claire in front of me, running with her camera, her mouth open in a scream. I saw 15 years of silence. I saw Vega's smile like a scar across my nightmares. I pulled the trigger. The gunshot roared in the unit, the recoil jerking through my arms. Vega staggered back, his smile vanishing, his eyes widening. Blood bloomed across his chest. For a heartbeat, silence. Then Hayes surged forward, his pistol raised. He fired again, and Vega collapsed onto the concrete, his body sprawling across the ledgers and files. The smell of gunpowder hung heavy in the air. My ears rang. My hands shook violently, the revolver slipping from my fingers and clattering to the floor. Michael's voice broke the silence, hoarse but fierce. "You did it." I stumbled to his side, my breath ragged. "No, we did it." Hayes lowered his pistol slowly, his face pale, blood soaking through his sleeve. His eyes met mine, raw and tired. "It's over." I shook my head, clutching the bag to my chest. "No, not until the world sees this. Not until everyone knows what he did." Hayes nodded once, grim. "Then let's finish it." We gathered everything, the ledgers, the files, the photographs. Vega's body lay cold on the floor, his smile gone forever. For the first time in 15 years, I felt the weight in my chest lift, just enough to breathe again. But I knew this wasn't victory. Not yet. Vega was only one piece. The cartel still breathed. The lies still lingered. The silence still screamed. As we stepped into the night, the dawn breaking pale and thin over the horizon, I held the bag tighter and whispered to myself, "Claire, I promise you, no more silence." I thought the night Claire died was the end of me. For 15 years I carried her ghost, her silence, her unanswered questions. And for 15 years I believed that grief was something you just buried until it rotted inside you. But standing in that storage unit, holding the truth in my hands, I finally understood. Pain doesn't disappear when you hide it. Secrets don't lose power when you pretend they don't exist. They only grow stronger in the dark. The truth nearly destroyed me. It nearly killed Michael. It almost cost Hayes what little redemption he had left, but it also sets us free. Because once the truth is out, silence loses its grip. I can't give Claire her life back. Nothing will ever erase what was taken from her. But I can carry her voice forward. I can use what I've lived through to make sure no other child, no other family, has to live with that same silence. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: running from the past doesn't heal you. Facing it does. Even when it terrifies you. Even when it breaks you open. Because in the end, that's how you find strength you didn't know you had. So here's my promise to Claire, to Michael, to myself, and to anyone who listens. We don't let fear dictate our lives. We don't let silence become our prison. And we don't carry guilt that doesn't belong to us. If you've lost someone, if you've been silenced, if you've been broken by the weight of secrets, please know this: you are not alone. Speak, share, reach for help. Because sometimes surviving isn't enough. Sometimes you're meant to turn survival into something bigger, something that saves the next person. That's why I started the foundation. To fight for children who saw too much, who carry scars no one else sees. To give them safety, a voice, and the promise I wish Claire had. Pain can make us bitter, or it can make us stronger. And every day, I choose stronger.